What I plan to do in the next 30-40 minutes is talk about inclusive growth and information technology and the connection between the two. But before I delve into the information technology part of it, let me broadly define why this is so important and why it is important for us to use the tools of modern technology to solve our problems. Because in some sense, we are very fortunate that while we are at a stage of development, the technology in the world has developed much faster than it was, say, in the time when development happened in the West, in Europe or in America. Because when that development happened 100 years back, we simply didn't have the instruments of information technology that we have today. So today, when we are sitting here looking at how to address the problems of India's growth, India's inclusion, making sure that everybody gets a fair deal, everybody gets opportunity, we're very fortunate that the technology side has matured a great deal. And in some sense, the smart and effective use of this technology will allow us to leapfrog on the development issue. And they've actually come up with a paradigm of development which other countries will not be able to emulate because they have legacy issues. And we have a chance to do it without any legacy issues in a greenfield world. So I think thinking through the strategy of that, the strategic architecture of that is very, very important decision that we have to take. Now, today we are in a country which is having a revolution of rising expectations. We have, as you know, the world's largest pool of young people. We're experiencing a demographic dividend, which means that we will have more young people than either old or very young babies. So we'll really have a very high level of people in the working age, which in turn means that a lot more people will be working, a lot less people need to be supported, which means our savings will be high, our investments will be high, which in turn means that our economy will grow rapidly. So this in turn is creating a revolution of rising expectations, because this whole thing is being fueled by a very young population which is impatient for growth and change and to reach their dreams and aspirations. This is further compounded by the fact that we obviously have a very open society, an open democracy, a thriving media, and all this is adding to the crucible of creating these expectations. It is therefore important that our capacity for public governance and public delivery needs to match these kind of expectations. And if we are not able to do that, then we will have a mismatch. So clearly, one challenge we have is the whole revolution of rising expectations. The second thing is the fact that the economy is now growing. And we have gone from the so-called Hindu rate of growth of 3 to 3.5% to now growth of 7-8%. And even in these globally troubled times, India continues to be a beacon of global growth. And this is expected to continue even if it is slightly lower because of the global environment. But what this means is that the pace of change of our society is much faster. So fundamentally, we are living in a world which is impatient with change, and that becomes very, very important. Now, one of the advantages of the economic growth has been that the government has been able to raise its taxes quite substantially. And one of the big benefits of that was that even as India's GDP was growing at 8% a year, as inflation was growing at 7% a year, which meant that the nominal GDP was growing at 15% a year, India's tax collections in the last 5-6 years was growing at 30 to 40% a year, which means that the government had more and more resources to fund many programs. So I think that's an important success of the economic growth. Now, at the same time, this economic growth led to the need to improve our social welfare programs. Now, when we start looking at these social welfare schemes, it becomes apparent that as we increase our spending on these programs, it's also important that we spend this money effectively and efficiently so that it's spent in the right way. So these are some of the changes that are happening around us. The other important thing which is happening because of the economic growth and other factors is the rapid migration happening within the country. More and more Indians are migrating and leaving the village or town and going to other cities. And this is being driven in the search for jobs and opportunities. And this trend is only going to continue in the next 10 to 20 years. The second reason there's going to be massive migration is because of the demographics of the country. When you look at the demographic patterns of India, you actually find two patterns. You find that the south and the west is aging whereas the north and the east is still very young. Now what that means is that tomorrow you're going to have a very large young population, but that young population is going to be in 5 or 6 states. And if those states are not able to provide the appropriate jobs and opportunity, people are going to migrate for a better future. So you're going to see migration happening from east and north to south and west. And you already see that across the country where you see this migration. A third reason for migration is going to be things like climate change, which will drive, big impact on the river basins in terms of floods and so forth. So that's going to drive migration. A fourth reason for migration is that people will move from the hinterland to coastal India. So whatever way you look at it, that India is going to have a large number of hundreds and millions of people migrating in the coming years. Now what has happened is that a lot of our public delivery systems assume a static view of the individual. In other words, they assume an individual is born in a particular place and lives and dies in the same place. So essentially, my point is that what is happening in the country today, the fact that there's a revolution of rising expectations, the fact that there is mobility of people, the fact that there's economic growth that is driving huge social entitlements, all this requires us to go and fundamentally relook at the architecture of how we deliver public services in a way that it reflects the new reality of India and India's people and what's happening to them. And that's what I think is the driver of what I'm saying. So these are the fundamental drivers that are happening, in the society and the economy. The second trend which we have is that computing power is becoming cheaper and cheaper year by year. So today we have seen very large applications on the internet which service literally hundreds and millions of people and provide services online using the cloud architecture. We need to build applications in India which service 1 billion people. And the reason we can do it today, and we could not have done it 5 years back, is thanks to the internet class applications that are developed. We now have the technology to build large scale applications that can benefit 1 billion people and put this on a cloud and make it do all the things that we want. So this is a very important development which has happened. The third important technological development which has happened is the rise of new kinds of devices in your hand. Obviously, the cell phone is a great example of something that is in everybody's hand. So increasingly, you're going to see all these devices which allow you to communicate over the network to the cloud. Now, the fourth thing, in a migrant and mobile world, identity and the proof of identity becomes very, very important. And also remember that the identities that the well-to-do have are nationally or internationally valid. But actually, when you look at the sort of architecture of identity in India, India's population is about 1.2 billion people. The number of people who have passports is about 50 million. It's less than 5%. The number of people who have PAN cards is maybe 100 million. The number of people who have driver's license may be about 200 million. The number of people who have mobile phones is about 500-600 million, which what it really means is that while we have a large number of identities, we don't really have a ubiquitous, universal, common identity that everybody has access to. And also remember that the identities that the well-to-do have are nationally or internationally valid. That is, the 50 million people who have passports can go anywhere in the world with a passport. The 100 million people with a PAN card can go anywhere in India with a PAN card. But if you have a ration card from a particular state, then that ration card is no use when you go to another state. In other words, the national mobility does not come from some of these documents like the ration card. And then finally, there is actually a very large number of people who don't have any identity whatsoever. So if you are a migrant who comes from a small village and comes to Delhi and you have no proof of who you are, you can't do anything. You can't open a bank account, you can't get a mobile connection, you can't get a ration card, you can't rent a house. In other words, lack of identity is a form of exclusion. We also realize that if you are going to design an identity system in 2011, we don't need to do it the way other people have done it. Now, identity or the need for having an identity number to identify a person has happened in the West in the 20th century. In the United States in 1936, under Franklin Roosevelt, as part of the New Deal and all that, and building a welfare state, they passed something called the Social Security Act. And as part of the Social Security Act, in 1936, they started issuing a number to everybody called as the Social Security number. In the UK, after the Second World War, when they built the welfare state and the Beveridge Commission came out with the report, they started issuing the National Insurance Number. So countries have essentially developed these numbering systems whenever they've expanded their social welfare programs. Now in India, as I explained to you earlier, the last 10 years has seen the rise of massive social welfare programs. Just to give you an idea, the money we spend as a country on benefits, these are benefits to individuals, I'm not talking about infrastructure building and all that, benefits to individuals is approximately 300,000 crores a year. So 300,000 crores is programs, is the money we spend every year, all of which are programs that are meant to go to individuals. They're not for building roads or highways. The money is spent on individuals. And if your fundamental way of identifying individuals is faulty, then how do you know it's reaching the right individuals? That's the big question. So when we were designing a system to build in 2011, we said, why do we have to do it in the way it was built elsewhere? And we said, let us look at what we can do with today's technology, which is why we said we will give everybody a unique number, but we'll give the unique number using biometrics. You know that biometrics, we capture the 10 fingerprints of every person. So they give 4, 4, and 2. So 3 operations, they give 10 fingerprints. And we take the iris picture of both the eyes. And what both these things do is they convert your biometric or physiological attributes into a unique digital pattern. And we believe that this unique digital pattern of 10 fingerprints and the 2 iris will give us uniqueness over 1 billion people. And then what we do, and this is where the technology becomes very sophisticated, is that when somebody enrolls into our system, we compare the biometrics of that individual with all the biometrics that we have to see whether they have come before under some other name or whatever. In other words, we do a process called deduplication. By using the biometrics and deduplication, we can make sure that everybody gets a unique number. Now, by doing this biometric deduplication and giving everybody a number, we are also doing something else which nobody else has done, which is we are giving them an online number. And the online ID is a key game-changing part of this application, because once you give somebody an online identity, then you can verify or authenticate that identity over a network anywhere in the country. In other words, let's say that a person comes to us who has absolutely no identity. They will go from that no identity to an online identity in one shot. So with this online authentication, it provides the basis for all kinds of services. And therefore, this online ID is not just some technology thing. It's fundamentally changing the balance of power between the individual and the service provider, and empowering and putting choice in the hands of the individual. And fundamentally using online identity verification and then creating choice among service providers, you can change the balance of power and empower people. And that's how really you can address corruption at the level of contact. So really it is a very important tool in the way you redesign the way public services. Now, I talked to you about 3 things. I talked to you about the fact that now we have network connectivity which allows us to connect to every individual. The fact that we have devices which people can get. You can get a mobile phone now for a few hundred rupees, so we can give everybody a mobile phone. We talked about the fact that you can build huge cloud applications, so you can service the country using these cloud applications. We talked about the fact that now through the Aadhaar program we are creating an online identity. And the 5th leg of this is using all this. The government is now working on an electronic payment system where not only everybody has an Aadhaar number, along with that Aadhaar number they have a bank account. Now, this is a very important thing, because today one of the big barriers for the poor people in getting bank accounts is they can't prove who they are. And because of the proving who you are has become more and more stringent, poor people can't get bank accounts. So what that means is that if somebody gets an Aadhaar number from us, they are automatically eligible to get a bank account. It's very, very important for financial inclusion. So we will now be able to open accounts for the poor people using the Aadhaar number. Then the government is intending to take its benefits program and start putting that money into these Aadhaar accounts. And then using a concept called a business correspondent, which is again something the Reserve Bank has given a very good policy. A business correspondent is a grocery store or a self-help group in a village who will have a small electronic device online called the micro ATM. And essentially this person gets 400 rupees in her account. She walks to the Kirana store or the business correspondent, authenticates online using the Aadhaar system, and can withdraw 400 rupees from the grocery store. So this combination of using Aadhaar KYC to open bank accounts, getting the government programs to fund money into these bank accounts, and using the BC network so people can withdraw money will radically change how people will get their benefits and entitlements. So basically what I've tried to show you is that, this technology is not some mumbo jumbo. It has real benefits which will affect the lives of the common man. Don't think of this as some technological gobbledygook. This is fundamental to change. And if we are going to change India at the scale, we have to change India at scale. We have to change India at speed. And we have to use the latest capabilities to do that, because as I explained earlier, we have this revolution of rising expectations, we have this economic growth, we have an impatient young population, they're all expecting better governance from us, and trying to do things in the old way, you're not going to fix this problem. You have to fundamentally leapfrog and take a radically new approach using all the tools that are at our disposal, using the intellectual capital of India, which has developed the solutions for the world, apply it for the solutions of India, and make a big difference in the coming years. Thank you very much.